You have had days where the work pulled you, where the session started and the time disappeared at the end of it. Something existed that didn't exist before, and the feeling of that, the specific, clean satisfaction of having moved something forward, was enough to make tomorrow's session feel like something you wanted rather than something you owed. You know that feeling exists. You have felt it. The problem is that you cannot manufacture it on demand. Some days it arrives and the work is effortless. Most days it doesn't, and the work is a negotiation between what you committed to and what your body currently wants. The progress addiction is not about making every day feel like the good ones. It is about building 7 daily rituals that make the brain register progress so consistently and so precisely that the absence of progress, the day where nothing moved, becomes the uncomfortable state rather than the default. Tony Stark did not work because the work always felt good. He worked because the workshop had been architected so thoroughly around the reward of progress that not working produced a specific restlessness that only building could relieve. These 7 rituals build the same architecture. Here is every one. Ritual 1. Name the one thing that would make today count. Before the day begins, in writing, every morning, not a list. One sentence. The specific output that would constitute genuine forward movement on the thing that matters most. The progress addiction requires a precise definition of what progress is, because without precision, the brain cannot register progress when it occurs. A vague intention produces a vague satisfaction at best. A named, specific output produces a clear neurochemical signal when it arrives. This happened. The thing moved, the day counted. That signal, fired reliably enough, trains the brain to seek the condition that produced it. Ritual 2. Start before you are ready. Every day, within the first 30 minutes of the working period, begin the named thing before the preparation for it is complete, before the desk is organized, before the playlist is cued, before the conditions are optimal. The ritual of imperfect starts builds the approach reflex that perfect condition waiting destroys. Stark did not wait for the workshop to be ready. He arrived, and the workshop organized itself around the work being in progress. The imperfect start is the progress addiction's entry point. Everything after the start is already inside the pull. Ritual 3. Mark the completion visibly every day. A physical mark, a line in a notebook, a date circled, a box checked by hand, not a digital log. Physical. The tactile act of marking completion fires a different and more durable reward signal than the digital equivalent. Over weeks, the accumulation of physical marks becomes visible evidence of the compounding, a record that can be held and looked at, and that communicates to the brain not just that today happened, but that today was part of a pattern that has been happening. The pattern itself becomes part of what the brain protects and seeks to extend. Ritual 4. End every session with a written answer to one question. What specifically moved today? Not what was done. What moved? The distinction is not semantic. You can do a great deal and move nothing. The progress addiction requires the brain to learn to distinguish between activity and movement, and the daily writing of what moved trains that distinction precisely. Over 30 days, the question itself becomes a productivity filter. The man who asks what moved today starts making decisions about how to spend tomorrow that are oriented toward movement rather than toward completion of tasks that look like work and aren't. Stay with rituals 5 through 7. The first 4 build the daily signal. What comes next builds the weekly and monthly architecture. And ritual 6 is the one that makes the addiction self-reinforcing rather than requiring constant maintenance from day to day. Ritual 5. Review the week's progress every Sunday in writing. Not a plan for next week, a review of this one. What moved? What didn't? What the pattern of the week reveals about where the friction is highest and where the momentum is strongest. The weekly review does 2 things that the daily ritual cannot. It makes the compounding visible across a unit of time, large enough to see direction, and it separates the productive pattern from the productive feeling pattern. A week where the named thing moved every day looks different on paper from a week where many tasks were completed, and the named thing did not. The review makes the difference visible. Visible differences produce different choices. Ritual 6. Build a monthly evidence file. Once a month, 5 minutes, write down 3 specific things that exist or are further along now than they were 30 days ago. Not goals, evidence. Things produced, skills advanced, positions improved. The monthly evidence file serves a function that no motivational content can replicate. It provides specific, personal, accumulated proof that the daily rituals are building something real. After 3 months of evidence files, the progress addiction has a foundation that does not depend on motivation because the brain has direct access to 3 months of documented proof that progress is occurring. Proof outperforms motivation every time. Stark's workshop was full of proof. Every completed suit was evidence that the building worked. The evidence file is yours. Ritual 7. Protect 1 hour per week of deliberate reflection on the direction of the progress, not the speed, the direction. The progress addiction without direction produces a man who is very good at moving and does not know where he is going. Once a week, for 1 hour, ask whether what is being built is actually the thing that needs to be built, whether the movement is in the right direction, whether the daily rituals are serving the life you are trying to construct, or the version of progress that feels good in the moment. Stark built dozens of suits that were never used in the exact configuration he built them. The reflection is what separated the suits that served the mission from the ones that served the workshop's momentum. Protect the hour. The direction is the only variable that makes the speed meaningful. You came into this expecting 7 techniques for being more productive, better systems for getting more done, optimized rituals that extract higher output from the same hours. These 7 rituals are not productivity techniques. They are reward engineering, the systematic restructuring of how the brain receives feedback from daily effort, so that progress registers as the reward rather than the distant, uncertain outcome the progress is supposed to produce. The progress addiction is not about working more. It is about the brain learning that today's movement is itself the reward rather than merely the means to a future one. When that learning is established, the restlessness that currently drives you toward distraction starts driving you toward the work instead, not because the work became easier, because the brain learned to find in it what it used to look for elsewhere. Tonight, 3 rituals. The 3 that address the specific points in your daily architecture where the progress signal is weakest, where the work happens and the brain receives the least clear feedback that anything moved. If you have never named the one thing before the day begins, do it tonight for tomorrow. 1 sentence. The specific output, written before sleep. If you have never asked what moved at the end of a session, ask it tonight about today. Write the answer in 1 sentence. If you have never built a monthly evidence file, start it tonight with 3 things that exist now that did not exist 3 months ago. The file begins with what is already true. Stark's relationship with the workshop was not built from a single productive day. It was built from the accumulated reward of thousands of days where something moved, and the brain received the signal that the movement was real. 3 rituals. Tonight, tomorrow, every day after. The addiction begins when the brain first receives the signal clearly enough to seek it again. Give it the signal tonight. The progress addiction is not about loving the work. It is about building the daily architecture that makes the brain seek progress the way it currently seeks everything easier. Build the architecture. The addiction follows. 3 rituals. The first signal tonight. The accumulation begins tomorrow. When the brain has enough evidence that progress is real and daily and producible, the restlessness redirects. The work stops being what you owe and starts being what relieves the specific discomfort of not having moved anything yet today. That shift is the addiction. These 7 rituals are the architecture that builds it. 1 question. Which of the 7 rituals, name the number, is the one most missing from your current daily architecture? That gap is where the progress signal is weakest. That ritual is the first one to install. Drop the number in the comments tonight, before the day ends without having moved anything. If this reframed progress from a destination to a daily signal, subscribe. More of this. The architecture builds the addiction. The addiction builds the life.